Now I can actually tell it to give me plot points. I can tell it I want to do a Regency house party, give it some parameters, give it some examples, and then it will start feeding me different plot ideas, like plot points of maybe there's a croquet game.
Joe Solari with the Business of Writing, and today we're going to talk about the robots taking over the world, artificial intelligence, and how it can all help you as an author with Elizabeth Ann West. How you doing, Elizabeth?
Good, good. Hello, everyone.
Great. So I got a little sarcastic in my statement based on when we got talking at Nate about some of the stuff that you're playing around with. I was really interested because I just put out a blog piece about artificial intelligence, more so talking about with narrators and some of the stuff that was going on there, but just how I think it's going to play out. And you and I are kindred spirits, and that this isn't the end of the world. It's actually the opposite. This is some really cool
I don't think
stuff.
these are Terminators. They're not Terminators.
Yeah. And then you go and take it up one more level and show us some pretty amazing stuff with the tool that you're using. So before we get into that, why don't you help people understand who you are, what you do, and then we can get into the really meaty stuff about artificial intelligence.
I'm one of those authors that I actually started off more tech-based. I was an SEO writer 2007 to 2011. So I was a tech jock. I was writing articles on technical stuff, how to deal with viruses, those kinds of things for websites. And then I was actually folding laundry while I was listening to the interview with Joe Conrath and Barry Eisler when he first gave up that 6-figure deal. This was like 2010, I think. And as I'm listening to them and I'm folding socks, they're talking about all the skills you need to be an indie author. And I realized I have them all already. So I was already planning to write a novel, and I just didn't even submit it to TradPub or anything. I published my first novel in 2011 with KDP.
Wow. And so really early.
Yes, very early. I'm class of 2011, as we like to say. And I wrote a baby mama drama from a male point of view. So it was different. It was one of the things that we can do as indies. We don't have to, at the time, everything was much more restricted as far as lanes go if you're doing genre fiction. Now everything is open. You can have reverse harem. And there's all these things that indies have done since then that have brought trends forward that I don't think would have happened without indies.
For sure.
Yeah.
There's some of my clients like who are making some really serious money. They're in genres that didn't exist in 2011.
Exactly. Unfortunately, baby mama dramas from the male point of view never took off as a trend, but but I did get to number 2 in the free store in 2012 with a BookBub. And that was, I think, the moment I realized like I could seriously do this. Like I have the chops to do this, because not everybody gets to number 2. And I would have been number 1, but Les Mis came out as a movie and Les Mis had number 1. So that's what happened. But then in 2014, I started writing in the genre that I love to write in. I was a book marketer for 3 years. So I always loved the tech side. And then in 2014, I wrote a Jane Austen fan fiction, which is my guilty pleasure to read. I love to time travel to 1812 and be reading about Mr. Darcy and the balls and the big houses and everything. And I put the book up, and before I shared the link, I had 12 sales already.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that's how I learned, oh, this is how Amazon sells books. And I had to be a different indie because I write in a niche genre. If you're thinking about the drill down of categories, it goes romance, then historical romance, then Regency romance, and then me with the Jane Austen fan fiction. So I'm 4 levels deep. I'm never going to be a genre that gets 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 people buying a book or grabbing a book in KU or something like that. So I had to do a different model where I had to think about that I have small volume, but they're very dedicated. So I actually sell my novels for $9.99 in the store because I know I'm not going to sell as many as authors in other genres that can do lower price points and have the volume to make it up.
That makes sense.
And that caused a lot of problems on forums.
I can imagine.
But I was an early adopter of dictation. My How to Train Your Dragon post is still on K-boards, Kindle boards. That was before the Chris Fox books about write 20K or anything like that. I'm actually quoted in that book. So I've always been that author that is doing the cool tech tools early. And that's how I have started to use Sudowrite as well.
So tell us a little, like my introduction to Sudowrite is you, but like somebody had to, like somehow you found out. Okay.
So actually that's not true. I have a Discord my Facebook group on what authors need to know. We have our own Discord and everything. And so there's a group of us that are always on the bleeding edge of publishing tools and everything like that. We have our own Midjourney AI server on the Discord so that we don't have to be in their public servers. But they were talking about Sudowrite. One of my friends was talking about, oh, I'm going to go do Sudowrite for 30 minutes because I don't feel like writing. And I'm like, wait, what? And she was explaining how she uses it when she has writer's block. And then I searched it and saw that Joanna Penn had done an article about it. And then I started diving deep into the mechanics of it so I could understand the algorithms and make sure that this wasn't like something that was going to give me a bunch of copyrighted material. And it's pretty much the same algorithms that do the predictive text when you're texting someone on your phone. That's the same engine that it's built on. So it understands words like as individual components. And then I started learning more about Sudowrite. I got in on the beta and joined their Slack group. And my book last December, I was using it to help with like description, because like I told you, I've written a lot of like ballroom scenes over and over again. I have to write this in my genre. I have to write the same scenes over and over again. And I think that's true for a lot of genres.
Yeah.
Science fiction, you're going to write a space marine battle. You're going to write certain beats are going to have to be written over and over again.
Yes.
And at the time, one of the features I loved best about Sudowrite was their description one, where they will give you all 5 senses plus some really crazy metaphorical ones. And we live in such an anti-tobacco society. It never dawned on me to add tobacco as a scent in the ballroom in 1812, even though most assuredly people were smoking pipes and everything there.
Oh, yeah.
But it was like a disconnect for me. And I was like, of course, there was the smell of tobacco in the air, and it's like choking up, cloying in the back of your throat. So I used it in that December mostly just to beef up my description. So I would write the skeleton line of this is what's happening, and then ask Sudowrite, hey, little robot, can you give me some description options? And the book came out, and a mentor of mine messaged me, and he's a New York Times bestselling author, and he's amazing. I just read your most recent book, and you really come up on your writing skills. I saw where you had the smell of tobacco. I felt it in my throat. I was like, that was the robot.
Oops.
Yeah. But the truth is that robot never would have written that or suggested that if I hadn't fed it the material that I had fed it. The robot's not able to go, I think I will write a book today in 1812 Regency and put tobacco in there. At least not yet. But it only works on what you feed into it. So it's like a really better spell checker than on your word processor.
When you showed this tool to me and some of the authors that we were talking to, it was one of those times where you can see like just the amazement and joy in people's face. And you started spinning up some of these examples, and I thought it was really helpful to understand the different pieces of how this all plays in. And we're going to do a demo to show some people. But before we go into that, so you did this one thing. Now, like, how are you using this tool for your business now, and how is it helping? And is there things that you think it hinders?
I think so. I still do dictate. First of all, I am a plotter, so people can just speaking writing language so people understand you're a pants, but you can use this as a pantser as well. I think it works better actually if you're a pantser than if you're a plotter. And I'll get into that. So I outline, but this thing now, and the other thing too is that Sudowrite has grown. It's getting new features every single day. It's learning based on what it has been fed and what it has already been doing. So now I can actually tell it to give me plot points. I can tell it I want to do a Regency house party, give it some parameters, give it some examples, and then it will start feeding me different plot ideas, like plot points of maybe there's a croquet game. Maybe there's a picnic on a hill. So it'll even help you generate some of these story beats. One of the worst parts, when I write a book, I'm really good at the ending and the beginning. I suck at the middle of the saggy middle. And Sudowrite can definitely help me just brainstorm some unexpected things. The other thing it'll do for me personally is it will give some ideas. And I'm one of those authors that I have to talk my book out. I have friends that I can call and we talk about the book when I get stuck. Sudowrite has not replaced that for me, but it's available to me if I can't get a friend on the phone or something like that, because it'll give me some ideas and then I can riff off of that. So it's like an improvisation tool or things like that. It might say picnic. I know I don't want to have a picnic, but maybe I have them hike up the trail or something like that to the woods, or croquet game. I've already done croquet game. Oh, but I forgot about bowls. They could do a bowling game on the lawn, kind of a thing. So it helps with that. And then the other thing, on days I don't want to write, which happens to all of us, I'm just like, I don't want to. I get in there and it's usually enough to just get me started for my day. My first writing session of the day, because I sprint, is usually my hardest. And by using Sudowrite, it really helps get the creative juices going because it never tires. It never fatigues. It's not spent because we're on deadline and we've already done 20,000 words in the last 3 days and this pre-order is due in 2 days. It's just never tired. So I think it has helped it's like working with the most eager co-writer ever that will throw all the spaghetti at the wall. And then you just have to work with it. You have to edit it. You have to change it.
Yeah, you'd said that before. And I think that's such an important idea as a creative, is that it's not always about just slugging the words out, is having something that throws some ideas out that make you laugh. Right. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, that was super silly and that wouldn't happen.
But
there's something in there that's interesting.
It can bring the joy back.
Yeah.
When you're down.
Cool. Why don't we take a look at some of this, the tool itself and some of the ways that you've been using it, and help people to see if that might be something that fits with their writing processes.
Okay, sure. What do we want to start from scratch first before we show them some of the things that we've already done so that they can see it like work first and then we can.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and real fast about Sudowrite because the pricing and everything, or we can talk about that at the end. But I know we did some calculations and it's very affordable when you're compared to hiring a ghostwriter, for example.
You and I were sharing, and I think it was like 0.02 cents.
Yeah, we'll look at it again because it's very affordable for that in that framework. What genre again do you write? Is it? I've worked with so many people that day.
I don't write fiction. I mainly write nonfiction. But
okay, let's write in a genre I don't usually write in, because not many people are going to write Jane Austen fan fiction. So maybe we want to work with like science fiction.
Yeah, why don't we do a science fiction? It's like space opera.
We're going to do space opera. Okay, so we are going to be on a spaceship arriving. So we have Galaxy Sector 56 Zebra 2. I'm just making this up. Yeah. Had seen the worst of I want something silly, wars of the galactic wars. That works, right?
Yeah.
Planets were destroyed, species eradicated.
Boy, it's grim here.
Yeah, I don't know. We're just going. I don't know. It's Tuesday. What can I say? And still let's see. You always take something like a blue jay and then you just like mess up the letters, right?
And still, how about something like the bar on some space station is.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so we're going like Hitchhiker's Galaxy, Guide to the Galaxy. Okay.
Yeah.
And still the bar on. Oh, let's use the brainstorm function because I want to brainstorm places. And we need give me a list of galactic bar names on strange planets. I misspelled galactic. Science fiction comedy is the context we're going to give it. And let's give some examples. Beetlejuice, 56, Andromeda. I could spell correctly, Elizabeth. I think Beetlejuice is they made it a star or something like that. And what would be another funny star name? Something like Rocket. Rum and Rockets.
There you go.
All right, so we're going to see what the thing can do. Galactic bar names on strange planets, science fiction comedy, Beetlejuice. Oh, Andromeda's misspelled. All right, and we'll click start and we'll see what it gives. Come on. Okay, it's thinking. And it's very quick. It's not the Catfish Nebula. So then you just thumbs up it. Starlight Lounge. Okay, that's a little pedantic, but sure. Yeah. Something with the red dwarf sounds funny. And I have a feeling some people who read science fiction, these are probably funnier to them.
Yeah.
Captain Bly's Polynesian Hoedown Bar and Grill. Okay, we like that one. Ches Zarka the Magnificent. Nope. And you can say, no, this doesn't work. This doesn't work. Oh, I like that one. The Ice Nine Lounge and the Hitchhiker's Gaze. So it's starting to understand what we're going for. The Catfish Nebula is the winner. What do you think?
Yeah, let's go with that one.
Okay. And that's the other thing I would say on this too. The Alliance of Independent Authors, I think, Ally, they have actually an ethics. They have already written like an ethics thing about using AI. And one of the things that you agree as authors to do is to not have any discriminatory language. So even though the robot told me Polynesian bar, personally, I probably would not use that descriptor. Like I would have to think about it. So that's the thing. So whatever the robot gives you, there is the chance that the robot can give you something that is potentially problematic or just not nice to groups of people. And so you just have to, you do have to be the final editor on that. Okay, so still the bar, Catfish Nebula. Planets were destroyed, species eradicated, and still the bar, the Catfish Nebula. Continued to pour pints of, I don't know a funny word for like, for alcohol in space. Oh, of spirit. Pour pints of spirits.
There we go.
Okay. Now, we've given it some words and we don't know what should happen next in our story. And the robot can actually do that. So one of the things that it has is autocomplete plus magic. That will give you like what could come next. Guided is interesting because guided will give you 3 different options, but you also can feed it. So sometimes from my outline, I will actually feed it with what comes next, if that makes sense. So let's go to guided. I put my cursor at the end, and the user interface on this is not very great. They're still working on that. So what you have to do is you have to select it and then put your cursor where it goes and then click the button guided. And now it will give me some suggestions. And I have my settings set, by the way, on like the most creative and to give me 3 different options. The bar could be abandoned as the fighting moves on to other galaxies. The bar could continue to be a meeting place for soldiers, mercenaries, and smugglers. The bar could be taken over by a new owner who's not associated with the Galactic Wars.
I like the last one.
Huh?
Yeah, I like that last one.
Yeah, I like the idea of now our story is this poor schlub now has inherited this new galactic bar in the middle of a war. So I'm going to click it, and now it's going to give me some ideas. The owner of the Catfish Nebula was an old woman named Maud. She had seen her fair share of galactic wars and knew how to hold her own in a brawl. But at heart, she was just a kindly old lady who wanted nothing more than to provide a safe haven for those who needed it. So you can see that it's very, what is the word? Like I would not put this whole stock in my book. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But you could get here. The bar was dimly lit with smoke rising from cigars and pipes filling the air. The walls were lined with bottles of every kind of liquor and match, some dating back centuries. And then, okay, so that's where this would spark my idea here. Okay, so we can travel by light years, right? So we can go back in time or whatever. So now you could add like some of the spaceships could go back in time, and that's how they were able to get the spirits. Yeah, you just travel a few thousand light years behind. Let's see, here's another option. It was a meeting place for diplomats, spies, and others looking to avoid the conflict. I like that. The bar was always neutral territory and no one dared decide to fight inside its walls. Now we have a different description. So it gave me two ideas. I think that must be what I have set in my settings now that I think about it. So here's where you do your settings. Yeah, I have 2 cards. You can tell it to give you as many as 6 cards, but we'll do 3 from now on. So I think I'm going to copy and paste this in. That kind of adds more about how we're going to continue to spread the spirits. And I think now we just have a character. Now would be a time to have a character. I know it gave us Maud. Do we want to have a different character be inheriting this?
Yeah.
What do you want to name that character? We could brainstorm some alien names.
Yep. I don't do that.
Okay. I forgot. I'm so sorry. I'm so used to working with fiction authors. So give me a list of funny alien names. And we're not going to give it much context because it should be able to figure this out. Start. If it's something very simple like that, like just give me some, see, now we're getting, I like Pip. We're not going to do Harry, but sometimes this thing is a 12-year-old. All right, Bartleby Poot is pretty funny as a name, I think. So we'll go back to this, and it does keep those. So I can come back over here, and what I brainstormed is right here available. So what I added is right there handy at the right-hand side. So even if I left and came back to the story, I could always go back in my history and see what it generated. Bartleby Poot. Oh, it wouldn't be a letter in his hand. Come on, Elizabeth, get out of 1812.
Yeah.
From his lawyer on, and I don't know, I'm just going to put alien planet name because I don't know what I'm going, like I can always come back.
Yeah.
And then I could go back over here to where they had, and there were some descriptions about it, the mercenaries and everything like that. So this is just an example of how it works. Now, what you can do is you can tell all of this, you can tell it to rewrite things as well. I just want to show features. We're not here to actually write a science fiction story. We've given it enough stuff and you could keep going. Just, we can see what the auto magic would do, where it just starts writing. So the guided is like ideas. Autocomplete just does like actual prose of what could come next. Bartleby approached the bar. Hello, me, Bartleby Poot. I've come to see Ambassador Zeta 2. Who invited you? No one invited me. This is a unique situation. It's very delicate. Bartleby Poot swayed back and forth. The strange liquid in his glass smacked against its side with a sound like sour notes played by an angry violinist.
Wow.
I know. It definitely picked up that we're being comedic instead of straight-laced.
Yeah.
So let's say I want to go ahead and do a rewrite of this. So I'm going to rewrite it. And you have some different options here. You can tell it to be more descriptive. You could tell it to more inner conflict. You could do custom. I'm going to do custom, and I'm going to say rewrite to have more dialogue. Go. Sometimes you have to, for the dialogue to work really well, you need to have at least 2 characters in the thing we've learned. And even this, it's having a hard time because I didn't give it any dialogue to begin with. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's go ahead and just insert this stuff in there. Oh, wow, look at this. Last call ever, as everyone is starting to head off to alien planet names. See how it picked up?
Yeah.
Because if I had the name of the alien planet there, it would have used that. It understood
that's really
that it was going to be a setting.
Yeah.
It's
that's
crazy.
Interesting too, because then if you are doing this and you created some plot points or locations or that, if your thing is you're not going to go use find and replace, you're still going to be covered.
And obviously that this doesn't make sense. If you were to read this, I know I just copied and pasted it into it, but I would have to edit this. But this Admiral Zoe is not my father. The barkeeper ignored him and tended to some customers at the bar in the ball. Last call as everyone is starting to head off to alien planet name. Staggered to the door and pressed his face up against the window. There were aliens, humans, and countless others all filing into ships and flying off into space without a care in the world. The Catfish Nebula always went to a neutral location on days like today for its 1-hour broadcast of sports ball. No one would be coming in here until it was over. So now this would be in contrast to where we said no one would dare fight. So I would have to reconcile this as the editor, as the writer. So that's what that is. It can change the tone. So the tone you can change it to more upbeat, fantastical, fast-paced, more conflicted. So it has a lot of tools to it. Over here with the more, you have twist is more like if you're coming up with plots, and it we'll play with that. So if we're writing right now, it only does literary, fantasy, and science fiction.
Okay.
So if I did science fiction and I go Bartleby Poot inherits a bar in Sector Zulu during the Galactic Wars. All right. So I'm going to do that and I click submit. The twist will help you take your story in unexpected directions like it talks about. So this is really just, it's almost like it reads, what is it called? Like copy for your blurb.
What I find interesting about this is one of the things that, and I wasn't playing around with the tool that was nearly as sophisticated as this, is that when you do, if you're an author and you're one of those kind of authors that you get jammed up at times because you're writing a book and you come up with another great idea and you get torn, this can be the escape hatch, right? Go put the idea in here and let it go do its thing. And then know that when you come back, when you're done with what you're working on, you can come back here and let it run and really see that idea generate into more than just one idea, multiple ideas. And it really just makes your creativity exponentially better.
Yes. And I would say too, in that scenario as an author, if there's something I love that I want to do, but I have to do something for a contract or something like most of us do. And sometimes that contract is a social contract with our readers. Like they know this next book has to come out or we have it on pre-order or something. Sudowrite helps me finish that project that I'm not really passionate about because I have this little passionate co-writer that doesn't care that it's that I'm bored with the title now. It's still going to keep giving the same level of creativity that it was giving on day one. So this
Cool.
right here, it's giving some ideas that could help. So here we have Bartleby's a freed slave, having been arrested in prison as a child, and he owns the bar only because he was able to beg, steal, and murder the landlord to get the palace guard to sell him the bar. The bar is really a prison from which escape is not possible. Now that's a twist.
That's interesting.
Bartleby's lieutenant and the bar's bartender are actually sleeper agents, both hoping to be free. That would be a twist on the comedic. This is supposed to, it's almost like The Good Place meeting a space opera, where you're really in hell, but it looks like heaven. Sits at the center where many alien races are hostile to each other, is assassinated. His widow then inherits his bar and successfully repeals the galactic police one Roomba at a time. Or Rumba.
Rumba.
Yeah, so it's got a lot of, we did some different things just to do some other genres here. This was, we were doing like a shapeshifter or something like urban fantasy more. We were writing this. And so in this case, we fed the black text here, the Curse of the Moon. Then we had used the write function when I talked about before the guided, I had fed it. Officer Samantha Cole is working her beat when she sees Stephen starting to transform. And then it gave us a bunch of options there. And we combined two of them because see, this one said his clothes were ripping as his body changed shape and fur started growing all of his body. And then this one had the Stephen, it's going to be okay, she said calmly. So we combined those two things to put them into the story. And that's where Sudowrite can really help. And suddenly, every time you go, you end up with 150 words, 250 words. So suddenly it's giving you between 10 and 30% of a scene if you're using it just a couple of times within that scene. If you're regularly writing 1,500 and 1,800 words and you ask Sudowrite to help you three or four times, like I said, it really just helps you get that extra 10 to 30% onto the page. And sometimes that makes all the difference.
Here's a question for you. How long have you been using this tool now?
Over a year.
Okay.
Since
And here's the real question. So over that year, how have you feel it's influenced your writing style?
So I think it has helped me write better, truthfully. So being somebody who likes to read British literature, 1812, reading historical type literature, there's a lot more description in there because they didn't have the internet. But I am someone who lives in the age where if I want to research anything, it's on my phone. And I think our modern fiction has lost a lot of the description and stuff because our readers are more educated, more aware of things than readers in the past. And what I mean by that is that it wasn't that long ago that a travel book is how you would learn about a place that you wanted to go visit. Now I can literally pull up pictures. I can pull up video. I can pull up a live camera feed on the hotel that I'm going to stay at. And I think that has naturally impacted all of our writing styles in a way that we were skimpy on the description. And the robot's not. The robot definitely wants to describe things if you tell it to describe things, which is the last, I think, feature I didn't show. If we go back to our Galaxy one, because I think that this is the feature that most people are excited about. I'm sorry, can you hear the dog bark or no?
Don't worry about it.
Okay. If I do here, Galaxy Sector, planets were destroyed, species eradicated, and then still the bar, the Catfish Nebula, continue to pour Prites of Spirits. If I highlight that and I click describe, it's going to give me all 5 senses and some metaphorical ones. And this is, I think, the feature that is the biggest thing for, even if you're not going to use it for plot points. If you're like, Elizabeth, I don't need any help. This can give you those descriptors. The bar was an old, dingy place. The walls were wood paneled, old and worn, stained with decades of spilled spirits and spilled blood. Even at the center of the galaxy, the Catfish Nebula still glows with the blue of a dying star. It was a small cottage, gives you ideas. So that was all sight, what you can see. I think sometimes we struggle with other senses. So what does it smell like? It smells of ozone, the burning odors of its gases. The bar smells like beer and barbecue, the blackened remnants of foods past. Or it does a pleasant mix of aged oak, the flotsam of 1,000 stars. I never would have thought to put that into a book. And I think that it immediately gives people a better reading experience if you're able to give them some of these visceral details. The sound emits a low hum, electrical buzz. The taste is what it would taste like. Touch. And then the funny ones are the metaphorical. The action was one long slap of words, and the bar had opened veins for the desperation that came after the war. Again, you can't use it just in the whole thing, but I like that phrase, desperation that came after the war. That starts me thinking about what is in this story world, what sacrifices have these aliens and humans and stuff had to make as part of the galactic wars.
Yeah, no, it's
Sorry,
really cool.
I don't even write science fiction. I'm just like, it's just a fun toy to play with. It really is. Anything else, or you want me to stop the share?
No, I think that's great. Probably blown a lot of people's minds that are just seeing this stuff. And so I know the next thing most people are going to want is like, how do I get it and how much does it cost and all that fun stuff.
So right now, as we're talking, hold on, I have to log out. I was part of the beta, and I'm grateful for that, because I have the beta is not open anymore, but there is a Slack group that you can join. You do get to try Sudowrite for free. And right now the pricing is, let's see, we'll do some math here. We have, I'll put it in the chat, $9.99 for 10,000 words. I think the thing that most people are going to be at is the $29 level, which is for 50,000 words. Because remember, I talked about, it doesn't write the whole book for you. You're probably going to use it to help you for about anywhere between 10 to 30% of the book. And then $99 is 100,000 AI words. And if I get my calculator out here,
I'm throwing it. So the 50,000 words is, did I do that right? Yeah, I did. Is 6/1000th of a cent.
Wait, I did the other way around. It would be 99 divided by 100,000 words, right? Or which one were you looking at? The 50,000 words?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. 29 divided by 50,000. Yeah. 0.00058.
Yeah.
Which, so to put it in perspective, that's half the cost of a page read in KU. So since authors often understand what we get paid in page reads, which is half a penny, roughly, so 0.004. This is half of a penny, roughly there.
So if we were thinking about you were going to go hire a ghostwriter, those are, from what I've seen, anywhere from 5 to 10 cents a word for a ghostwriter.
Or even if you are a ghostwriter, because I know a lot of authors who they write what they're passionate about, but they're still also paying bills on the side by ghostwriting for other authors. It could also be a great tool for you as a ghostwriter, because if you are making 3 cents a word, 4 cents a word, this is literally a fraction of that.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Is that, and the stuff that really makes the book worthwhile, right? I know that a lot of folks that get in that and they're on a tight deadline and they're trying to puff up the word count because there's a context of, hey, this book has to be 100,000 words. Well, now it's not just garbage going in there. You can really speed up the process when you're stuck and on a deadline, for sure.
Yeah, I think my goal is to get to a place, because there's a lot of authors out there who come from the tradition of writing a skeleton draft. I was never somebody who did that. I came from the school of my final draft is my best draft. Weird, like everyone comes from weird, different places. Even in school, I would write my final draft and then make it worse and turn that in as my rough draft. I just didn't do multiple drafts. I've never been that author. But I think with Sudowrite, there's a possibility for me to learn the practice of writing like a skeleton draft, putting it into Sudowrite, and then using Sudowrite to put flesh to the bones, so to speak.
Yeah.
And again, it's not all Sudowrite. I don't want to make it sound like Elizabeth doesn't write her books. That's not the case at all. I use Sudowrite to give me some ideas, and I use parts of it, and then I build onto it and everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that helps to put context on all of this is that what I'm excited about is how this can be a tool for a creative. If you don't have the creative piece, this is never going to work. The guys that are going to take things like this and try and make a book from whole cloth and put that up on, I can already see how hey, I'm going to teach you how you can use artificial intelligence to become a best-selling author. That's going to last for about 5 minutes.
Yeah, right? It's not going to be, you can see it's non sequitur. And eventually, if you don't keep feeding the robot, it gets circular in its logic. It was created by Amit Gupta. And then also there's a writer who's on the team as well. They're all in the Slack group for this. I do want to point out one important thing about this. There are 2 things. There are more advanced features I didn't talk about today, such as you can do a hashtag in between scenes. So you can have like your whole manuscript in there. And you can give it commands like third person point of view, so it knows what voice and everything like to use. You also can tell it to rewrite passages in another character's voice. A good friend of mine writes sweet romance, and he uses it to help. If he writes a scene in the female character's point of view, he can use it to help get large swaths of the male point of view of the same situation. And we tested that at Neek. We wrote a scene we were writing romance, and we wrote a character coming into a coffee shop, and basically the meet cute was he was falling in love with the barista, who was a new barista. And then I told it to write it from the barista's point of view. And what he did is he forgot his order. And we named the barista Julian. And when I told it to write from Julian's point of view, it was like, it picked it up that Julian stared at the customer as he could not remember his order. And I was like, wow, just like how it picked up that alien planet name.
Yeah.
It does understand limitedly what you're feeding it and how to use that.
That's amazing.
One thing they want to expand in is lore books. They're building that feature out, I think, in the next 6 months or so, where you can actually give it, these are my character names, these are the information about the characters and things like that. And so it has that information to pull from.
That's, if you think about, for some folks that are 10 books deep in a series, if they could dump that stuff in, how just from the sake, like most authors I know that they're having to hire somebody or have like fans check stuff out because they forget stuff. Like they can't keep track of their own world.
That's features I forgot to tell about. Hold on a minute here.
Back to the share.
I'm sorry. If you want your podcast to be all encompassing, we want it to have legs.
Yeah.
This has, let me go to one of my manuscripts, which is, because we were doing a lot of different.
Yeah. So just to put this in context for people that are watching this or listening, we were at NINC and we're in the kind of main hallway, and Elizabeth and I were talking, and then people started collecting around, and I called a few clients over, and it ended up being this little group huddled up around her computer, ripping at all these different ideas. There was quite a group that was excited about this. And one of the things that I found interesting was Nora Phoenix was there, and she mentioned how, because English is her second language, sometimes she has trouble with descriptions in English. And the idea of having this tool just to prompt her and give her some things to help with was really a game changer for her.
Right. Okay, here, this is you can see I have 16,000 words in this. This is actually one of my manuscripts I'm working on right now. And I have hashtags in between right here. So if I go up, let me go up to a hashtag. So this is a whole scene, and I'm going to highlight it. And
I think there was 2 hashtags in there.
Yeah, so the hashtags separate the scene. So there's the hashtag, and then the next hashtag symbolizes that it's in the next scene.
Okay.
So I'm grabbing one whole scene's worth of material. I have 1,852 words highlighted. See?
Yeah.
And I go more, and I say summarize. It will summarize that scene for me. Elizabeth Darcy, the mistress of Pemberley, is having tea with her aunt and her new sister-in-law. The scene opens with a discussion of Elizabeth's mother. Okay, so it gets some things wrong, but because I know that's not Elizabeth's mother, it's Elizabeth's aunt, Lady Matlock, who's trying to get Elizabeth to change the baskets in the room. So it will summarize your book for you to make a story Bible, and you just have to make minor tweaks to it to be more accurate because you have the whole context of the book. That is a huge time saver, I think. If you've written something and you just need to summarize it, especially if you're summarizing something for an outline or whatever, because you're writing those series and you want to be able to make like a narrative outline. Maybe you're a pantser and you need to make a narrative outline on the back side of it.
That's cool.
The other thing it'll do is it will expand. That's to take something and write more. Feedback is interesting. It will simulate readers reading your book. You're confused and I think this feature is a little unsung hero because sometimes it reminds me of those bigger arching themes. So the robot's picking up themes in the prose, and that gives me something that I can lean into on an edit or something like that if I want to.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So right here it says the passage's theme was about how we women who are so close to each other can pretend to misunderstand, ignore, and mislead each other in the interests of our sex. It seemed to be about how we put the wishes of other women in our lives, even those of the same sex, before those of our own husbands. And I know what the scene is about, and that's not too far off of what was going on there. So that gives me some materials to really push into it. It talked about
Mm.
the description of the fresco was really well done. And then it always gives you a few areas to explore. And this is like a robot developmental editor. It's not as good as a real developmental editor. I don't panic anyone who does that for a living. But it gives some ideas of things that if I decided the scene did need to be more words, it gives me some different areas specifically that I could expand on.
And I think like your cautionary thing there is if you're a developmental editor, this becomes a tool that helps you be more productive person. Right.
Yep.
So again, any of these tools are, if you're using it to augment your existing skill set and improve your skill set over time, right?
Yeah.
You start to see, oh, there's some themes that I haven't even thought about before that, or if this comes back and says, hey, you're trying to talk about apples and it's thinking oranges, you need to really
rethink this scene, or
yeah.
maybe this scene's doing something different. Now, about those words, when we talked about the pricing, I just highlighted this one card that it gave me as a pseudo reader one, and it came out to 272 words. Those 272 words are what's considered AI generated words. So it would count against my 10,000, 50,000, or 100,000 word limit each month.
Yeah.
And then you can just purchase more words. So I would say to people, if you're going to use Sudo, number one, use the free trial. Number two, contact me or someone who's using the tool to make sure that you have time to put it through its paces, that you're able to start learning everything you can about it in that 2-week process. Because once you start paying by the word, you may have to be judicious about how many words you're generating and stuff. Not the time to start exploring what the features do.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it'll count against you.
Yeah.
And that's Sudo.
Cool. Elizabeth, thanks for sharing that. I think this is one of these things where the more that people understand how these tools really work, they'll see them as not a threat, but something that's going to be complementary to their business.
I think so too. I do too. I am grateful for Sudo. There are some others out there, Jasper, there's Novel AI. There's a couple of other tools out there. I've tried them. They didn't work for me, but that doesn't necessarily mean they won't work for someone else. A lot of these tools, actually, we were talking about Dungeons and Dragons before we got started here. A lot of these tools, they started up around campaign writing for D&D, believe it or not.
That's interesting.
So the sci-fi fantasy authors really have a leg up on these other genres in terms of these tools are really fine-tuned and attuned for your genre specifically. Romance authors and historical fiction authors like myself, those other tools aren't necessarily as great for our genres. And that's why I use Sudowrite, because Sudowrite's probably the one that's the most able to do everything. And it can also do nonfiction as well. I know you mostly write nonfiction, but you can use it, or if you put it in your facts or whatever that you're building off of, it is able to build nonfiction prose around it.
Yeah, I did pick up the tool and I've been playing around with it, and I plan on doing an article using it to make sure. But again, I think what I'm seeing is that the more you play with it, it's learning, so that it gets better. The more it's worth to spend some words to get it to kind of learn your stuff, right?
Yeah, my little robot's very confused now. It thinks I write 10 different genres.
Yeah, like I use Describe for audio stuff, and so it learns your voice. So now I've got it to the point where I have an assistant take my blogs and throws them in there, and it just reads it out in my voice. But it took months of running my videos through there, and was initially designed just so you could go in there and if you mumbled a word or mispronounced it, it could put it in that same space, and the mouth might be off a little bit, but the word would be right in your voice. They never intended it to be a AI generator, text to voice in your voice.
It is.
And it's made me immensely more productive, because that's time I don't have to sit reading my content. It all becomes part of a process that somebody else handles for me. And that makes my life easier. I can stay very focused on, have you ever heard of Dean Jackson?
No, but.
So he's a big marketer.
Yeah.
And he's got this concept of the self-milking cow.
Okay.
And so the idea is like there's cows and there's farm. Cows are the content creators. And they, in his magical world, if you could put on like hoof-shaped mittens and do your job that day as a cow, and everything that you could do with those mittens on, that's what you should be doing. And the rest of the stuff is stuff a farmer needs to do. Cows can't self-milk. They need somebody to do that stuff for them. So as a content creator, what are the things that you can get off your plate and have either something or somebody do for you so that you can stay really in your most joyful place and focused on making the milk. Your business can go, that's how a business can scale, right?
Yeah, and I think that's that idea that reminds me of the Eisenhower matrix of like
Very
urgent and like important and urgent. And so
urgent. Yeah.
the stuff that you're delegating, that block that you delegate, which is the stuff that is important but not urgent, that sector is what you're looking at to find tools. When I started having pain in my neck, I started dictating. And dictating was really big for me because you were talking about text to speech. I needed speech to text,
Yeah.
put in type, and I needed that. And now it's so good. I can just use my phone's internal dictation if I want to walk and dictate. But I can remember taking my daughter to the park and I put headphones in and I'm literally walking laps around the park and writing a whole chapter while she's going down the slide and playing. And I'm able to watch her talk. And the reason I use headphones is I don't like the sound of my own voice. So I would listen to like movie scores or something like that in my headphones. So I didn't have to hear that. But talking about being the modern mom, here I was milking my cow, so to speak, talking, but I also have to watch my child, but I also have to give her childhood. I can't just lock her in a room and be like, here, kid, here. So I was having to do three things at once. And I think that's what our society is asking, not just moms, but all parents now to do. The pandemic has shifted work to home in such a big way. And more people are realizing these tools that we indies and authors have been using, or those of us who have been working from home for a long time. And they're realizing like, wait, these were always available. I could have been using this whole time. So I think the very definition of work your friend Dean Jackson's talking about too is changing.
Yeah. And this is part of the stuff I always talk about is this is the dirty part of being an indie publisher, right? No one, and I just had a call with somebody who he's a very successful writer and he's publishing through another indie. And there was a conversation about, do I publish some of my stuff on my own? It's like, you can. That's the beautiful thing. And what you have is a decision about what you want to do. If you want to be very content focused, you can be that person. And the trade-off is you're going to have to share profits with somebody that's doing all that other work. If you want to do all that other work, you'll keep more money, but you're doing all that other work.
Yeah, you're doing all that work.
You have to decide, and everybody's decision is different. And this, though, changes things. It's like you decide that, hey, I want that freedom of control of all of this stuff, but I trade off that I have to do all that work as well. Okay, now I can maybe have some tools that streamline my process. And thinking through that, you talk about you like to do the speech to text, like all these things start to connect together. It's like, this is my process. I go and I riff while I'm walking around with my kids or my dog. I do an edit on it so that I can expand this thing more in an AI. Then
it gets a final copy edit. And then I actually blog my chapters to my readers. My readers read as I write. So I have a feedback loop inside my writing process where my readers are able to respond to the book as it's being created.
Yeah, that's crazy stuff. And in the end, that's in your niche, that's the experience some people want and they're going to pay for it.
It is. And I experimented early on. So now the big thing is selling your books direct. And I'm laughing a little bit because I've been doing that since 2015. I was using Gumroad and such. And I love that Damon Courtney's book funnel now can do the direct sales and everything. But I found out that my readers would buy it direct for me on Gumroad. And then they would also go buy it on Amazon. And that baffled me. That I'm like, guys, it's the same file. It's just an ebook, but it doesn't matter to them. That's not, and I understand that because I'm a fan of other authors that like, I have the shut up and take my money mantra too.
Yeah.
So if you can appreciate that you might be somebody shut up and take my money and you can accept that. Cause I think a lot of authors get uncomfortable about that. That imposter syndrome is strong. So it's no one could possibly love my work. Well, no, not everybody loves my work, but I do have some fans that really love it. And so then my next job becomes, how do I be a good steward of my business that I make sure I stay in business year after year? Because my readers are not served if I run my business in such a way that it becomes unprofitable and then I have to quit writing altogether and go do something else. And I think that mindset is new for a lot of authors. They're like, oh, it's not me being greedy to be a good business person. It's making sure I stay in business to serve my customers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the other part of that this can help with is one of the big fallacies of being an author is that this isn't a job. It's my passion.
Yeah.
It's not actually a job.
They create rules for themselves, like rules that don't make sense in business. Like it
Oh
doesn't
yeah,
count as writing if you didn't do it, if you didn't suffer for it.
but I think that for a lot of folks, like here's the deal. If your pipes were leaking, you called up a plumber and he said, yeah, I'm blocked today. I can't plumb.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I can't plumb.
Like you would be yelping, this guy's an idiot. I don't know what's going on over there. Don't use this guy. My basement's flooding and he can't plumb. What the hell? So like, why aren't authors, like from their fans' perspective, like that's where things are at. And you have to respect that if you expect them to give you money. And it doesn't matter that you've toiled on this thing for 3 years. They're going to read it in 3 hours.
And then they're going to say, when's the next one?
Exactly.
What?
And
I just finished this.
And but wait a minute. What that is saying, the implicit statement there is, I'm ready to give you more money.
Yes.
But you don't have product. It's, hey, I've been sitting out in front of the Apple store with my wallet and you guys quit making phones.
It's difficult as a solopreneur. Most indies are a one man or one woman show. And it's difficult to be in that mindset of constantly creating product. I've written 3 books this year already. And when this one goes out at the end of the month, it'll be my 4th book this year. I'm hoping to do a 5th one. The most I've ever written in a year is 8 books, but most of them, over half of them were novellas that year. And it's funny to me because that doesn't make me a very prolific writer in the indie world. There are indies that 2 books a month. And I get that. And there are people I know who write those. They are not using tools or anything like that. They're not using ghosts, or they get up every day, they do their 9,000 words and then they go on. But it's all about trade-offs and decisions that you have to make, because a lot of writers I know who do that, they're in a different situation than I am. They don't have a child necessarily, or if they do, they have another caregiver who is doing the bulk of the work or something like that. And I think authors compare themselves a lot.
Oh,
and that's one of the reasons why I shared Sudowrite like I did in the lobby of Nink. I was shocked that other than Nick Thacker at 20 books to 50K, he's going to talk about AI writing, because I learned that at the Tiki Bar. But I wasn't seeing it on any of the big cons this year. Nobody was talking about it, but I knew people have been using it for more than a year. And everyone's been very quiet about it because I think they think that it's somehow a competitive advantage or whatever, and they don't necessarily want other people to have it.
Yeah, I would think it comes from 2 places, either that or it's I don't want people to know that this isn't my.
Yes, that's the other one magic. I was going to say too. So it's like 2 reasons. So here's where I'm like, we can combat both of those by being out in the open about it on 2 different ways. The more people who use artificial intelligence like Sudowrite in ethical ways, I want to specify that, the better the tool will become for all of us. The better it'll work, it'll stay around, that kind of a thing. We have to have people using the tool in order for it to be cost effective for these companies that are paying for the server and everything like that, for the computing power, the processors. 2, if we are out in the open about using AI, we will normalize it so there isn't any shame about using it, just like you would a co-writer. James Patterson has been using human robots with his works for decades now. He didn't have a Sudowrite, he just had co-writers. So it's a well-established thing. The other thing too is I think that Sudowrite could open the door for other people to become authors that may not have been able to do so beforehand. There are people who are very creative and very smart, but they may suffer from some kind of learning disability or something like that. Sudowrite can open the doors for them. So I think it's also going to help our industry be even more diverse than it already is.
No, I think those are all amazing points that get lost in this. It gets probably the biggest thing that I hear with this, and I've heard a lot on the narration side, is, oh, this is going to replace us. Like the robots are going to take our jobs. And it's like, no, if you're not able to outperform a robot, you're probably not going to be able to perform in this market, because just talking writing specifically, there's 3,000 books being published every day and growing. There's no end to the content. There's the focus has to be on finding your audience, like you've done, and earning their attention with your content. But if you think it's the content is the great definer of this, you're wrong, because that's not how this market works. Like 2 equally good books will have very different outcomes just because of the dynamics of how the publishing market works. And with a fire hose of content dumping out, there's already good and bad books coming in that just go into the ether, never to be seen again.
Yeah.
The fact that more comes in because of AI isn't going to change that at all, in my view.
No, and you're already competing also with books that have already been published. That's the thing about books, because a book that was published 3 years ago can find a new reader on that day. So I always teach authors that a sale of a book is like a moment in time that all the variables came at the right time. It was a book that the reader wanted and it was available. Those are the two things that come into play. A lot of times authors think like they have to be priced cheaply in order to sell books. And I remind them, no, first thing, you have to write a book people want to read. Because if
Yep.
you shop for books, you never go, let me go find a 99-cent book. You go, let me find a book I want to read. And then price is always a secondary consideration.
And that's something I talk about, is that the price isn't the decision. What the transaction is about is a reader's precious reading time. They prepared to give it to you, because even on a free book, they're not prepared to do that.
No, I'm giving people a homework assignment. Get my free book. Get my free book. You literally are asking people for 3 to 6 hours of their time to read your book.
Yeah. And in their mind, it's, hey, I'm a busy person. I only have so much of this reading time in my life. I love it. It's my jam. And I would like to find a new author to read. I just don't know if I want to take that risk. And unless I know that it's going to be a payoff, I'm going to go back and read a book I already read.
Yeah.
Right?
So it's interesting you mentioned that. So I never share a link to an individual book on the store.
Okay.
I always share a link to my author profile. And the reason I do that is because as a reader, I never want to read a book by an author and fall in love with them like it's a first date and they have nothing else for me to read. So I use that idea to always share the link to my profile. And when I started doing that, when I made that change about 5 years ago, I started to see days where book 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of my series would all sell on one day, which I was like, oh. So yes, sometimes giving them the profile click, I might lose some people but I don't think so. I know the adage in the internet is the more clicks they have to do, the more likely you are to lose the sale. But
yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, you.
I think that's one of the most bullshit ideas there is in the world, because your assumption is that from an ad to that landing page, they're ready to buy.
Yes.
And most people, yes, there are a lot of one-click voracious people, but most people do a little research before they buy. And that actually hurts your results on Amazon, because all that cold traffic that drops on the page that bounces brings down your conversion rate.
Yeah.
I would rather bring those people to a sales page on my website and educate the hell out of them and give them a path that the reality is it's only 2 or 3% of that traffic that's going to ever buy.
Yes. So
that's what I go to the sales page.
They get a
Amazon
chapter to read. And so usually in my sales funnel, they have read a chapter and there's buy buttons at the bottom. And those buy buttons take them to the profile, my author profile on whatever their preferred vendor is. So if it's Apple, Google, what have you, Nook, anything like that. So that's why I land them on the profile page, so that they're able to see social proof. I have a bunch of other books in this genre. And when I made that change, I started seeing, like I said, it was very clear that it was most likely one transaction was getting a couple of my books, because they were buying a bunch of the books in the same series, because they've already read a chapter. They already know that they like my writing. I've already ticked that box. So now they're just making a decision of which products of mine do they want. And instead of them only showing them one product, I showed them multiple products. And so they were able to add all of them to my cart. And that's what I designed. So I like to design systems. That's one of my favorite things about this job. I love that we get to wear so many hats.
Yeah, some people like that.
Yeah. All right. Well, I know we'll end up talking for hours and hours.
Yes,
and hours.
yeah.
This was a blast. I'd love to come again. This was so much fun. So thank you.
Yeah, definitely. We'll have you on again. I know we have some other topics we've already talked about. We're going to have you back on, and I think there's probably a bunch of stuff we can just riff on. But where should people be looking for you other than your profile page?
So I do own What Authors Need to Know on Facebook. I'm also the marketing director for ScribeCount. So if you use ScribeCount, which is data, it gets all your sales data in one spot. You can find me there. I will be teaching at 20 books to 50K in Vegas, which I know you will be as well.
Yep.
And you can reach me at writer@elizabethannwest.com. And I do answer emails and stuff. If anybody ever needs help, I just hop into a Zoom call with them and help them with whatever they need. I've been doing this for almost 15 years now. I think it's good that we all help each other and everybody's available for if you have a question or something like that in the indie world.
Cool. Elizabeth, it's been awesome.
Thank you.
See you later.